A billionaire takes her daughter to blind date, then sees a single dad and does the unbelievable. Golden light poured from the chandeliers of Labalessa, dripping down walls lined with framed art and reflecting off crystal glasses like captured stars. Silverware glinted, conversation rose and fell in quiet waves, and every laugh seemed perfectly measured, perfectly placed. It was a room full of people who didn't need to raise their voice to be heard. Power didn't shout here, it murmured. K.H. Langston walked through the entrance as if the restaurant had been designed for her stride. In a way, it had. At 34, she was the sort of billionaire people built buildings for, a name whispered in boardrooms and dissected in business magazines. Platinum blonde hair fell in smooth, disciplined waves over her shoulders, her dress a masterclass in understated wealth, the kind that didn't need to prove anything. Her hand, though, told a different story. Clinging to it was a much smaller one. Aubrey, 5 years old, wore a blush pink dress with lace trim and tiny ballet flats that made the lightest sounds on the marble floor. Her dark eyes were wide, taking in chandeliers and waiters and high-backed velvet chairs. "Is this where the princes eat, Mommy?" she whispered, almost afraid to be heard. K.H. Lowe's lips curved faintly, a smile more practiced than spontaneous. "No, darling," she murmured. "This is where people with real power eat." Tonight wasn't a business negotiation, at least not on paper. Her assistant had arranged a blind date with a man whose resume read like a golden ticket. Hedge fund background, Ivy League, data-driven, zero public scandal, minimal emotional clutter. Efficient, tidy. On screen, he'd been everything she was supposed to want. She had brought her daughter for one reason, to observe. One day she would tell Aubrey that charm fades, but influence doesn't. That compatibility is not about butterflies, but about strategy. That choosing a man is not about falling, but aligning. Tonight was a lesson in quiet disguise. They were seated by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights outside rippling like a second sky. The table was flawless, white linen. Linen napkins folded into intricate shapes that looked almost too pretty to touch. K.H. checked her watch. Her date was late. Aubrey swung her legs under the chair, eyes drifting from her glass of bubbly water to the orchestra of strangers. Dresses, suits, gestures, fingers around wine stems. Her gaze slowed, then stopped at a table in the corner partly hidden behind a tall palm. "Mommy," she whispered. K.H. barely glanced up from her phone. "Yes, baby." "There." K.H. followed her line of sight. In that tucked-away corner sat a man who looked like he'd taken a wrong turn on the way to somewhere simpler. No tuxedo, no cufflinks, just a blue plaid shirt with rolled sleeves and shoulders that seemed strong from actual work, not a gym membership. His hair was tousled, his jaw shadowed. No tie, no watch worth photographing. Across from him sat a little girl in a pink dress nearly identical to Aubrey's. Ages matched too, as if the universe had copied and pasted one life into another across the room. Sauce dotted the girl's cheek. Her laughter didn't float politely into the air. It burst out of her like it had never been told to be quiet. The man sliced a piece of pizza into neat squares, concentrating like the plate was fragile crystal instead of a simple white dish. "You sure you can handle that big slice?" he teased. "It's not that big," the girl squealed. "It's bigger than your face," he said, dabbing off excess sauce before sliding the plate toward her. Then, noticing the stain on her chin, he took his napkin and wiped it away gently, as if he'd done it 10,000 times before. Aubrey went very still, her eyes glued to the scene. Her hand loosened from her water glass. Her lower lip parted just slightly. K.H. noticed her daughter's focus and lightly tapped her wrist. "Aubrey, don't stare." The little girl turned but didn't fully look away. "Mommy," she said softly, "can we sit with them?" K.H. blinked. "What?" "The girl has the same dress as me," Aubrey said matter-of-factly, "but she looks happier." The word slid under K.H. skin like a needle. She looked again at the table, at the girl nearly identical to her own in size and dress and age, at the father who didn't seem to care who watched them, only that the little girl in front of him was laughing. It was the kind of happiness that wasn't polished but full, the kind that never gets scheduled into a calendar. Her date still wasn't here. Her phone remained silent. Her assistant's carefully curated match remained an empty chair. But across the room, her daughter's heart had already chosen where it wanted to be. K.H. Lowe exhaled. It sounded a little like defeat and a little like relief. "Come," she said quietly. Aubrey almost bounced out of her seat, fingers wrapping around her mother, again, this time pulling. They crossed the restaurant, drawing a wave of subtle glances. K.H. Lowe could feel the weight of eyes on her, but for once she didn't adjust her posture to accommodate them. The man looked up, startled. His gaze flicked to K.H. Lowe's face, and recognition landed. Her face had been on magazine covers, on financial news, on billboards beside gleaming buildings she owned. He jerked to his feet so quickly his glass nearly tipped. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said smoothly, voice calm, neutral. "My daughter noticed your daughter." Her chin tilted slightly toward the two pink dresses. "Would you mind if we joined you for a few minutes?" His name was Noah Reed. He didn't offer that. Not yet. All he knew in that moment was that a woman the world watched had just asked to sit at his table. No, yes. I mean, sure. Please," he said, stumbling over his words as he reached to pull out a chair. He wiped his hand quickly on a napkin before touching the back of it. Charming, awkward, real. K.H. Lowe sat gracefully, her spine straight but her heart strangely off balance. Aubrey slipped onto the bench beside the other girl, bright-eyed already. "Hi," the girl chirped. "I'm Macy." "I'm Aubrey," came the reply. Two small hands reached instinctively, fingers brushing. And just like that, before any grown-up could decide if this was wise or strategic or proper, two children decided it was right. The table that had once held only one pizza and two glasses now felt suddenly full. Full of voices, full of warmth, full of a kind of ease that didn't care about dress codes or Forbes lists. Aubrey and Macy sat shoulder to shoulder, their matching pink skirts blending together like they'd been designed that way on purpose. "Your dress has sparkles," Macy observed, carefully assessing the sequins on Aubrey's sleeves. "So does yours," Aubrey giggled, "but yours is pinker." They giggled like they'd agreed on something very important. Their plates became shared territory almost immediately. Aubrey's fork migrated to Macy's plate without anyone asking. Noah quietly moved a slice of pizza onto a smaller plate and slid it closer to Aubrey, picking the piece with the least sauce like it was instinct. "Thank you," Aubrey said, shy but sincere. "She always picks the clean slice when I'm tired," Macy whispered conspiratorially. "Says it makes me look like I cooked better than I did." K.H. Lowe watched all this with a kind of detached fascination. She didn't know whether she felt disoriented or exposed. Here she was, in the restaurant where senators and CEOs crafted their public images over halibut, and her daughter was sharing pizza with a stranger in a flannel shirt. "You two met 5 minutes ago," she murmured, half to herself. Noah glanced over, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Kids don't waste time deciding who deserves their heart," he said. "They just know." K.H. Lowe turned her gaze on him properly now, evaluating with an eye honed by years of negotiations. His hair was slightly too long. His shirt, clean but worn. He had the build of someone who'd carried heavy things that weren't always his. His hands moved with a carefulness she recognized from surgeons and craftsmen. His eyes stayed on his daughter even while he spoke. "Do you come here often?" she asked, more to fill space than from curiosity. "First time," he admitted, scratching his jaw lightly. Macy saw a picture of the chandeliers online and called it the Princess Light Place. Saved up for a month. I told her we'd pick one special night to try it. His words startled her more than she let show. Saved up. For this. For pizza. while she had spent more on one centerpiece arrangement than most people paid for rent. "I'm K.H. Lowe," she said, though he already knew. "Noah," he replied, "this is Macy. She thinks she owns the world." "I don't," Macy shot back. "I only own the pink parts." Aubrey laughed so hard a tiny bubble escaped her lips and burst against the rim of her glass. From a nearby table, a woman in a sleek designer gown watched them with barely concealed disdain. "Is this a charity dinner?" she murmured to her companion, just loud enough to float over. "I didn't know Labalessa did public outreach now." K.H. Lowe heard it. Of course she did. Years in this world had sharpened her ears to every slight, every whisper. She saw Noah stilling too, his jaw tightening, though he kept his eyes on his daughter. Before either adult could respond, a small sound cut through the smooth music. Macy stood up. Her tiny fists were balled at her sides, her chin lifted. Her voice, though small, carried farther than it had any right to. "My dad is not a charity case," she said, glaring in the direction of the whisperer. "He's my hero." The restaurant paused, forks hovered, glasses rested midair. Even the violinist seemed to falter for half a beat. Macy's cheeks flushed, bravado giving way to embarrassment as she sank back down quickly. Her eyes still burned, though. They burned with the same fierce protectiveness K.H. Lowe had once felt for herself. Beside her, Aubrey reached out and gently took her hand. "My daddy, in heaven," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But if I could pick a new one, I'd pick yours." The words landed like a soft earthquake between them. Noah's throat bobbed. He looked like someone had pulled the world out from under his feet and replaced it with something gentler. He swallowed, lips parting as if to speak, then closed again. His hand moved instead. He laid his palm on Macy's small shoulder, warm, steady, anchoring. "It's okay," he murmured just for her. "Let it go, kiddo." 2 words, that was all, but something in Macy's posture changed. Her shoulders dropped. Her anger cooled. She leaned into his touch for the barest moment, like she needed that connection before returning to her pizza. K.H. Lowe had seen billion-dollar negotiations pivot on a sentence. She had watched men twice Noah's size try to command rooms with rehearsed speeches, curated charm, manufactured authority. She had never seen anyone calm a storm with 2 words and a hand on a child's shoulder. 2 minutes later, the girls were back to designing their imaginary bakery. "We'll make heart-shaped cookies," Macy declared. "With glitter sprinkles," Aubrey added, "and we'll only sell to nice people." "Everyone else gets broccoli," Macy decided. Noah chuckled under his breath. "Savage," he said. K.H. Lowe's phone buzzed. She slid it out from beneath the napkin with the habitual grace of someone who had learned to live in 2 worlds at once, the one in front of her and the one that lived inside her screen. One new message glowed bright. Flagged code red, emergency board meeting, possible internal leak, narrative turning against you, Sterling moving fast, details unfolding. Click. The words blurred for a moment before snapping into harsh clarity. The restaurant seemed to tilt slightly. Her heart picked up speed, then stumbled, like it was tripping over invisible steps. Her fingers clenched around the phone. Her throat went tight. The edges of the room softened, then sharpened. Sound started to feel far away. "K.H. Lowe," Noah's voice cut through the static. Calm, low, not intrusive, just present. "You okay?" She opened her mouth. "I just need a second," she managed, but her voice didn't sound like her own. It sounded smaller, hollow. She reached for her water, but her hand shook, the glass wobbling against her fingers. Her chest tightened. Breath refused to travel all the way in. The walls of Labalessa, the ones that had always made her feel powerful, suddenly seemed too close. She didn't even realize she was falling until she was. Noah was already on his feet. He moved with a swiftness that didn't match his gentle demeanor, catching her just as her body tipped sideways from the chair. Conversation stalled. A fork clattered. Somewhere, a server gasped. He eased her into the padded bench, checking her head, her posture, his movements efficient but careful, as if he had done this before. Many times. "Aubrey," he said, voice steady, eyes never leaving K.H. Lowe's face. "Come stand right here where I can see you." The little girl scrambled around the table, panic sparking in her eyes. "Mommy." "She's okay," Noah said. "I promise, just breathe." He grabbed a glass, filled it halfway with water from the pitcher and tore open a sugar packet with his thumb. A waiter stumbled forward. "Should we call?" "Not yet," Noah said calmly. "Give me 30 seconds." He slid his fingers to the side of K.H. Lowe's neck, counting, his gaze fixed on his watch. Fast but shallow, blood sugar, stress, fear. "K.H. Lowe," he said quietly, bringing the glass to her lips. "You're safe. Drink a little, just a sip." Her eyelids fluttered. A faint groan escaped her throat. Water touched her mouth and she swallowed reflexively. "Good," he murmured. "Breathe in through your nose slowly, now out through your mouth." Her lungs followed the instructions before her brain caught up. In, out, one beat at a time. Across the bench, Aubrey's small hands were pressed to her own mouth, her eyes wide and glassy. "I thought you were leaving like Daddy," she whispered, voice broken, tears gathering like a sudden storm. Noah's head turned and the look in his eyes shifted. He reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "She's not leaving," he said. "She just scared herself a little. She's still here." K.H. Lowe's vision finally began to clear. Shapes sharpened. Sound filtered back in, the low murmur of frightened diners, the clink of glass, a distant violin picking up where it had faltered. Her gaze found Noah's. "What happened?" she managed, throat dry. "You fainted," he said, not unkindly. "Likely stress and low blood sugar working together. Your body hit a wall before your brain did." She blinked, embarrassment crashing over her in a hot wave. People had seen. They had seen her, K.H. Lowe Langston, unconscious, vulnerable, weak. She tried to sit up quickly, hands fumbling for posture, for poise. Noah's hand rose, not to push her back but to steady her forearm. "Hey," he said quietly, "your daughter is watching. You stand back up for her, not for them." The words landed with a force she hadn't prepared for. Not for them, for her. Aubrey's fingers clutched at the fabric of her dress, eyes still wet with fear. K.H. Lowe inhaled slowly, then nodded. With Noah's support, she rose from the bench, not gracefully, not theatrically, just humanly. Aubrey rushed into her arms, wrapping herself around her mother's waist, as if trying to hold her in place. "I thought you were going to disappear too," she sobbed. "No, baby," K.H. Lowe whispered, burying her face in her daughter's hair. "No, I'm right here." When she looked back at Noah, his hands had returned to his sides. He wasn't hovering. He wasn't inserting himself. He was just there. "You knew what to do," she said, voice softer than it had been all night. "I used to be a trauma medic," he replied, "a lifetime ago." Suddenly, the plaid shirt, the calm under pressure, the way he counted a pulse by touch instead of tech made sense. Her eyes dropped to his hands again, calloused, steady, capable, hands that had once held lives at their breaking point. "I didn't even thank you," she said. "You don't have to," he replied simply, nodding toward Aubrey still clinging to her. She already did. The private room upstairs was quiet, the noise of the restaurant muted behind thick glass and a closed door. The lights were softer here, casting gentle shadows instead of exposing every angle. K.H. Lowe sat on a plush velvet sofa, the gold clip from her hair dangling from her fingers. She let it fall into her lap, and her hair tumbled around her shoulders. For the first time in years, she didn't immediately smooth it back into place. Aubrey sat pressed against her side, small hand curled in the fabric of her dress. The silence stretched between heartbeats. Then, in a wavering whisper, "Mommy." "Yes, baby." "Are you going to disappear too, like Daddy?" The words were too big for such a small voice. They landed squarely in the center of K.H. Lowe's chest, knocking the wind out of something deeper than lungs. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Noah stepped into the room quietly, closing the door behind him. He didn't ask permission to join them. He didn't hover at the threshold like a guest. He walked closer, then knelt in front of the couch so he was eye level with the child clutching a mother's fear. "Can I sit by you for a second?" he asked Aubrey. She blinked, then nodded minutely. Instead, he gently lifted her, slowly, as if she were made of something delicate, and settled her onto his lap, her legs draping over his thigh. His palm rested gently against the back of her head. "Breathe with me," he said softly. "Can you do that?" Her breath hitched, she nodded. "In through your nose," he instructed, exaggerating his own breathing just enough for her to mimic. "Slow, okay. Now blow it out like you're trying to move a feather." She exhaled shakily. Again, each breath steadied a fraction more than the last. "Good," he murmured. "Now what's my shirt made of?" "Cotton," she sniffled. "What color is it?" "Blue." "Can you squeeze my hand?" he asked. Her tiny fingers tightened around his. "You feel that? Then I'm here, and your mommy's right there. Nobody's disappearing. Not today, okay?" Her body slowly relaxed against him. Within 2 minutes, the tremors in her shoulders faded. Her breathing leveled out. Her head tipped against his chest like it had always belonged here. K.H. Lowe watched, her heart lodged somewhere in her throat. She had paid teams of experts, hired the best, read every parenting book that promised resilience, healing, emotional regulation. "I employ a full-time pediatric therapist," she said quietly, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "I've sat in child psychology seminars, flown in specialists, optimized her meals, her schedule, her sleep." Her voice cracked. "But I've never seen her calm down like that. Not once." Noah didn't look smug. He didn't look proud. He just looked sad. "It's not about fixing them," he said. "Sometimes it's about being still enough for them to land." She looked at the girl in his arms, at the way Aubrey's fingers had found the soft fabric of his shirt and clung like he'd always been part of her world. "What are you?" she asked quietly, half joking, half in awe. "Some kind of child whisperer?" "Battlefield medic," he replied, gaze drifting briefly, as if remembering sand, sirens, and shadows. Later, trauma response, front lines, high-pressure zones. My job was to get people through the worst 5 minutes of their life." Her spine straightened. "And now?" she asked. "Now?" He looked down at Aubrey, then thought of the little girl waiting downstairs. "Now I just try to make sure my daughter never has to see what I've seen." A silence settled, heavy but not hostile. "I lost my husband 3 years ago," K.H. Lowe said suddenly. "Car accident. One phone call and the future vanished. Aubrey was too little to understand, old enough to remember." Noah's jaw flexed, pain flickering in his eyes. "I lost my wife," he said quietly. "Not in a battle, in a hospital." She turned toward him, startled. "She needed emergency surgery," he explained, his voice flattening slightly in the way people's voices do when they've rehearsed a story in their heads but never fully spoken it out loud. "The surgeon called me mid-procedure for input. I gave it. Thought I was helping. Thought I was saving her." He paused. "She never woke up." "It wasn't your fault," K.H. Lowe said instantly, the words out before she could filter them. He gave a small, tired shrug. "I was her husband and I wasn't there after that. I stopped trying to save the world, just focused on keeping one little girl okay." K.H. Lowe watched Aubrey's head rising and falling with his breathing. "I've tried to give my daughter the best of everything money buys," she said slowly. "The right school, the safest car, the most secure house, the healthiest food." She swallowed. "But what she really needed was exactly what you just did." She looked at his hands again. "She needed those hands," she said softly. Not my shares, not my lawyers, just this. He didn't answer, he didn't need to. The morning after, the world was not gentle. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire collapses during dinner, investors uneasy, leadership stability in question. Clips from someone's phone showed K.H. Low mid-fall, then in Noah's arms, her hair limp, eyes closed. Without sound, without context, it looked like a crack in an indestructible facade. By lunch, Langston Enterprises had dipped more than 4%. By 1, the board had scheduled an emergency session. By 2, her assistant's voice was shaking on the phone. "They want a vote," Claire whispered. Sterling calling it a sign, a message from the market. "He's painting you as fragile." K.H. Lowe stood in her home office, the city skyline a blur behind her glass wall. Her chest felt tight, the memory of last night still etched into her bones. A knock. She opened the door to find Noah standing there in the flannel, holding 2 paper cups. "Coffee," he said, stepping inside when she didn't send him away. "The real stuff, not the boardroom kind." She took the cup without a word. Her fingers were colder than the mug. "I saw the video," he said. "Everyone has," she replied bitterly. "Who had access to that angle?" he asked. "Just Claire. She handles security feeds, internal media, all of it." "And Claire worked for who before you?" he asked. She frowned. "Sterling, you think he—" "I think a clip like that doesn't leak in 2 minutes unless someone wants it to," Noah said. "This wasn't an accident. It was weaponized." Her shoulders slumped. "He's been circling my position for a year," she admitted, "pushing for contingency plans in case I get distracted by motherhood." "Of course he has," Noah said. "Power hates sharing." He pulled out a small drive and placed it on her desk. "What's that?" she asked. "Context," he replied, "if you want it." 2 hours later, the boardroom felt colder than the air conditioning could account for. Sterling stood at the end, voice smooth, false concern dripping from every practiced word. "With so much at stake," he was saying, "we can't afford even the perception of instability. Our CEO publicly collapsing in one of the city's most visible restaurants, in front of clients and cameras, sends the wrong message." Behind him, a still frame of the video played on loop. K.H. Lowe slumped, Noah catching her. Her vulnerability paused mid-motion. Sterling spread his hands. "For the good of the company, I move we initiate a leadership transition." Murmurs rose, some nods, some nervous frowns. The door opened. Noah stepped in. He didn't belong in this room, and yet somehow he did. His presence changed the air. Less polish, more gravity. Sterling's jaw clenched. "This is a private." "I'm not here to sit," Noah said calmly, "just to show you something you didn't see." He walked to the head of the table, plugged in the drive, and a new video appeared on the screen. Time-stamped security footage. The same moment from a different angle. It showed K.H. Lowe scanning her phone, her shoulders tense, her breathing quickening. It showed her assistant, Claire, noticing her distress, not reaching to help but subtly angling her phone. Recording. Then, as K.H. Lowe began to fall, not moving toward her boss, but stepping aside to capture a better shot. Then, seconds after K.H. Lowe is caught and seated, the footage showed Claire slipping away, fingers flying over her phone. Noah's voice cut through the stunned silence. "You saw a collapse," he said. "What you didn't see was a betrayal." He clicked again. An email appeared on screen, an attachment, a time stamp. From Claire. To PR firm on Sterling's payroll. Subject: use this now. Sent 2 minutes after K.H. Lowe hit the bench. "This wasn't concern for the company," Noah continued. "This was a man manufacturing evidence to exploit a human moment." Sterling turned red. "This is circumstantial. You have no right." "What I have," Noah said evenly, "is a daughter watching how grown-ups treat the people who fall." He turned toward the board members. "Yes, your CEO fainted. Do you know why? Because she has been carrying a company, a grieving child, and a grieving city on little sleep and less food. Her body insisted she stop for a moment, and instead of catching her, one of you chose to push. He stepped away from the screen. You don't need a leader who never falls, he said. You need one who gets back up, and she already has. The room shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Another closed their folder. The spell Sterling had been weaving began to fray. The motion to remove K.H. Lowe failed. The motion to investigate Sterling's actions passed. When the room emptied, K.H. Lowe stayed seated. She stared at the table surface for a moment, the wood grain blurring. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly when Noah stepped closer. He leaned against the table, not too near. I know. They saw me on the floor, she said, voice raw. And now they've seen me being rescued, saved, weak. No, he replied. They saw a human being pushed too far, then stand again. That scares people who only know how to wear masks. She exhaled slowly. The tightness in her chest loosened. They saw the CEO rise, she murmured. He tilted his head. I saw the mother fall, he said, and the woman try to pretend she didn't. Their eyes met. For the first time there was nothing between them. No titles, no wealth, no roles. Just two people who had been broken in different ways and still chose to show up. Days blurred softer after that. The Langston house, once a museum of expensive quiet, began to sound like a home. Tiny footsteps racing down halls. High-pitched laughter bouncing off marble. The dull thuds of cushions becoming building materials for forts. One Saturday morning, sunlight spilled into the kitchen in golden sheets. Noah stood at the stove barefoot, flipping pancakes with practiced concentration. He had a smear of batter on his forearm, and his hair was a little too messy to belong to a man in a billion-dollar world, but somehow it fit this kitchen better than any catered spread ever had. At the island, Aubrey and Macy sat side by side on stools, arguing over which pancakes should have chocolate chips and which should have blueberries. Heart-shaped, Aubrey reminded. With extra syrup, Macy added firmly. Yes, ma'am, Noah said. Chef Reed obeys all princess orders. K.H. Lowe leaned in the doorway, wearing a simple silk robe instead of armor. Her hair was down, her face bare, her expression softer than any magazine shot had ever captured. You realize they're never going to eat normal circles again, she said. Circles are a scam, he replied. She laughed. It felt light in her mouth now. As the day stretched on, the four of them wandered out to the terrace. The sky was painted in soft oranges and pinks, the city skyline washed in molten light. Below, the lawn rolled out in rich green, a perfect playground. The girls raced ahead, hand in hand, their matching dresses fluttering. They spun in clumsy circles, shrieking when they fell into the grass, then popping up again like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened. K.H. Lowe and Noah walked behind them slowly, their steps finding the same rhythm without trying. You know, she said quietly, eyes on the two small figures, I've spent years trying to control everything. Properties, markets, narratives. I bought safety, curated perfection, managed risk. She swallowed. But I never realized the one thing I couldn't buy was this, the sound of her laughing like that. Trust me, he said. Some of us never had the money to try. We learned early that the best things show up when you stop trying to earn them. She slipped her hand into his. He looked down, surprised. Then his fingers closed around hers, holding, not claiming. You don't have to be the medic anymore, she said. Not the fixer, not the one who keeps everyone from falling apart. What do I have to be then? He asked softly. She smiled, eyes glistening as the wind brushed her hair into his shoulder. Just the man who comes home, she said. His throat tightened. Look, Macy said, we're all connected. Like a family, Aubrey said. Neither of the adults corrected them.